بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Okay, apparently there's some static noise. I think it's the, just bear with me, it's the fan from the computer. So. Hamza, is that okay? Is the sound, is it working now? Okay, brilliant. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين والصحابة والميامين أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Today's session is a very, very important one, and it's a, I would say, it's an exploration or a reflection, I think is a better word, of maybe the past year actually, for many of us, and the importance of the last year. There may be some overlaps. I gave a discourse some weeks ago, I don't know if it may be a month ago or more, on purpose, and I would recommend that if some of the things that I'm going to mention to have overlap, and I've spoken about that, some of the details I'm going to speak about briefly today in detail in that video. However, today is a focus on a few things, inshallah. I've titled it Awake for a reason. It's something that came to me and I really wanted to focus on this idea. What does it mean? I want to ask a question right at the beginning for all of us to reflect over. And that is the following, that what does it mean to be awake? It's a very important question because we really value our state of wakefulness. Everybody values it. When you have a bad dream and then you wake up, you value the fact that it was only a dream. And you assume that what we're living in right now is a reality. But what does it actually mean to be awake? And are we as individuals awake? And if we're not awake, what will it take to wake us up or to awaken us from that slumber? And I'm going to ask several serious questions today, and it's going to be a serious discourse. I mean, most of my discourses are serious because of my lack of facial expression, but that's just my temperament, maybe. My grandmother, my mom's mom, she said once to me that, she said, your father's side of the family are famous for, meaning our whole lineage maybe, are famous for not being so emotional, and it shows in their faces. So maybe it's that, I don't know. But anyway, oh, Allah bless you. I've just got a message on there that from Abdul Basir's sister. I'm going to mention him at the end of this last segment. One of my very, very dear friends, very close friend, who I consider to be, a spiritual brother as well in that sense, who passed away 2 days ago. Allah, and he would come onto these discourses as well, such as the reality of life and death. and he passed away, rahimahullah, same age as me, went to college together. I've known him for more than 20 years. So I hope that Allah grant him, everlasting happiness in the hereafter, inshallah. There are a few things that I put in the title. I'm just going to fix my chair because it's... Sorry about that. There's a few things that I put in the title that are important to this discourse today. One of them is this idea of loneliness. Another is an idea of loss, and with loss comes illness, and also the idea of death as well. And I want to talk about all of those things, inshallah. But before that, I want to introduce the question that I asked earlier about, are we awake or not? I want to just, in a few minutes, just give an overview of, just a reflection about the last year. This last year, obviously, it's been a very, very difficult year for almost everybody. Very few people have survived the year without some form of loss, you could say, if that be material loss in terms of money, housing, if that be loss of loved ones, if that be loss of health. It's essentially a year of loss for many, many people. And I've been asked to speak about the pandemic and all these things many times by people, so I maybe come in today. But we have never experienced such a year before. And today I want to talk about some of those elements that we've experienced within the year and try to process them, inshallah. I want to begin by mentioning something that Allah says in the Quran. I'm going to talk about several verses today and that are very important. Allah says, زُيِّنَ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. That God says, for those who don't believe, the world has been beautified for them. The world has been beautified, زُيِّنَ لِلَّذِينَ. But interestingly enough, that this word kafaru in Arabic carries, you could say, two meanings in context, depending how you want to use it or apply it. The word kafaru, of course, means those who don't believe, but it also comes from the idea of kufran or ni'mah, those who do not show gratitude. So an extended meaning could be that those who do not show gratitude, this world becomes beautiful for them. It'll only be beautified for those people who do not show gratitude to God. Here, of course, the original meaning was the idea of those who disbelieve, because what else do they have except this dunya? This is their be-all and end-all. And on that, I want to begin with this question. Or not this question, but this point. That this life that we're living, we have entirely misunderstood, mistranslated, misinterpreted, and whatever you want to put after that. It's what it actually is. It's haqiqah. And haqiqah is a very important thing to the believer. For us as believers, the most important thing for us is what's true, what's real. And that's why I asked the question right at the beginning, that are you awake or are you asleep? Are you in slumber, state of slumber? Because believers, people who believe, they believe in something they can't see, of course. That's what we do. Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, those who believe in that which is unseen from them. That's what belief means, doesn't it? That who are we? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of this world? And we've misunderstood that entirely. And you only learn that as if you're blessed enough to meet certain people, possibly, that have come to that realization, or God endows you with it, or that you read about it of people of God or godly people who came to that realization. The point that I'm trying to make is that the world that we live in currently and the way that we live our lives currently is a state of untruth. We have almost lied to ourselves. And what we've done is, and this is where I'm going to introduce the first point, the idea I've mentioned in the poster, which is loneliness, is we are constantly lying to ourselves. We are covering up the truth of what we're here for, what the purpose of this world is. Take materialism as a point before I get to it. Materialism is the great scam, consumerism of this era. That's what it is, you see. What else is it? It's lied to us. They told us that if we buy something, and if we buy more of it, and if we buy more, it just will make us happier. If we buy the latest device, or if we have good clothes, or if we have a bigger house, maybe we'll be happier. That's going to fix our marital problems. A bigger house, that was a problem between husband and wife, of course, apparently, that their house wasn't big enough, and they needed more space, and that's why they're always arguing. Not the fact that there's deep-rooted problems there in their relationship. Or we've been lied to that, if you get a better job, then that will make you financially more free. And the more financially free you are, you can free that time up for the deen, for the religion. These delusions that we've bought into. That the more dunya we have, that means more religion we'll have. Because of that, more religion, I mean more we'll understand reality. We'll work for a while and save up a lot of money, and then we'll get some reality, a dose of reality later. We'll invest in that, as if God consciousness is something you can purchase. Something really interesting that Imam Muhasibi states in his book. He quote a statement of Abu Dhar. I'm just going to mention the last point, which is relevant, and I'll read the whole quote at the end, inshallah. He says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ قَلِيلًا يُغْنِيكَ خَيْرٌ مِنْ كَثِيرٍ يُلْهِيكَ. He said, a little bit in your life, a little bit, sufficiency, what you can survive on, and more, to make you comfortable. يُغْنِيكَ خَيْرٌ, something that will free you up. Meaning, if your life is such that it gives you freedom, meaning what you have currently, is better than having a lot that just busies you in entertainment, that takes you away from God. And then one who comments on this, the Muhashi, the editor, in the footnotes puts a statement of Hasan al-Basri, that he writes that every door almost that you chase of the dunya and you open, it closes 12 doors to the akhirah. It's very important that it's quite deep, that we assume that we're unlocking something, but really we're just closing doors to God. So money will never, God is not a commodity. You can't purchase God, you see. So to think that the more financially free I am, the closer I will be to God, is a delusion. So this is all materialism and consumerism, the new God now for people, the new idol that they've created, that they work towards all of their lives. That's all they work for. 40, 50 years just for that, not understanding that we were not sent here for that to begin with. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, He says, Inna dar al-akhirah lahi al-hayawan, that what comes after the dar al-akhirah, the abode of the afterlife, Allah says it's hayawan. Interestingly enough, this word hayawan in Arabic is used for animals. It means animal, you see, but it means life. Why didn't Allah say hayat? Why didn't He use the word hayat and not hayawan? Why did He use a slightly different word? There's this understanding among some grammarians that the more letters in a word, the more meaning they give. And God is trying to elucidate to the idea that, or not demonstrate, but God is trying to tell us that the hereafter is much greater than what we have here. I want to talk a little bit about loneliness. And loneliness is a very real thing. Isn't everybody feeling some form of loneliness now that we're isolated and we're in a state of almost partial seclusion in our homes, and we have to put up apparently with, we have to put up with reality, difficulties. We're complaining about our freedoms and things of that nature. We were never free. It's a delusion that we think we're free. It's almost like the prison. At a certain time they get time to go out in the yard and exercise, and we're just in a bigger prison, that's all. We just didn't realize that. But anyway, I want to talk about loneliness. What is loneliness, and why is it important to this to the idea of being awake? Well, loneliness is the root of all suffering of the ego. The central greatest point of suffering for the ego is loneliness. It's the thing that makes it suffer the most. And what we do is, when we feel lonely, we kind of try to fill that apparent void with certain things like addictions, for instance. So we feel the loneliness, and then what we do is we fill it, you see, with addictions. Could be whatever it may be. Some fill it with porn, some fill it with overeating, some fill it with Netflix. Whatever diversion or distraction you can fill it with, you want to get rid of it, you see. You want to remove this idea. You don't want to feel that way. You don't want to feel a state of loneliness, to the extent that you will find females, women, that will stay in an abusive relationship just because they often don't want to feel lonely, or they fear loneliness. They fear the idea of being alone, you see. But what is loneliness in the first place? Why is it even there? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought of why internally that we all feel a sense of loneliness? I mean, even more so now, probably. People living on their own and during the lockdown, or even not living alone, but living with a few family members, and you don't have your normal social life. Loneliness is a very interesting idea, because loneliness is a realization of yourself, that there's something inside that exists. We need to take advantage of the idea of loneliness and unpack it. And I want to do that a little bit today, inshallah. I want to begin with that, the idea of loneliness, and what will not cure loneliness. You can't take that away from yourself, and I'll explain why. Bear in mind that where we are right now, currently in our lives, is a place or a time in a long sequence, you see. Where were you before you were born? You were somewhere else. Alastu bi rabbikum qalu bala shahidna. It's in the Quran. Oh, our Lord, we testify, we witness that you are our Lord. God says, am I not your Lord? And we say, of course you are God, you are our Lord. Shahidna, we have witnessed it. We've been alive for a very long time. We were there. But we were individuals. We were lonely, you could say, alone. We recognized that we were individuals, part of something greater, of course, as mentioned in the hadith of Ubay ibn Ka'b. And then we came into this world very lonely, as a child. You grow up, but you're still individual. You're still that single person. You can't get rid of that idea that you're an individual, or you cannot get rid of that loneliness, except you have to embrace it and understand that what you actually need is realization. You're just trying to ignore the idea of loneliness by just filling that void. But the only way that it can be understood, the only way that your individual self can feel peace in your existence, this existential crisis that we're having, is by connecting to something that's infinite. The idea is God, of course. But to do that, you have to understand your purpose. And this keeps taking me back to my original point. The reason we feel so lonely is because we just don't know what we're doing. We don't know why we're here. We're having this existential crisis often. So what do? We will, think that I'll just better my career. That's going to fill that void. It never fills it. I'm just going to do something to fill it, distract myself. When it's crying out for us to realize why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing, that's all it's asking of you. Your soul, your consciousness just wants to connect with what's real. And that's what I want to talk about here at this point now. Of what is it then that we need to awaken to? What do we need to, if we're in a state of slumber, what should we be awakening ourselves to? Well, if we open the Quran, which we probably do to read, but not do to know what God wants from us, we'll realize that we've been sent to this earth for one reason and one reason only. And that's to spiritually evolve. And I want to unpack this idea a little bit. Yesterday I had a class and I was talking about something. It was to do with this to a degree, and the idea that we as human beings have a choice. Either we are going to be selfish or we're going to be selflesser. Either we're going to think to materially entertain ourselves, be selfish, greed, avarice, all these things. It's all about me. Or we're going to be selfless. What selflessness does, or altruism, is it allows you to spiritually evolve. It takes away your ego. It destroys it, because your ego is not you. Bear that in mind. When you were created by God, you didn't have an ego. There was no ego there. There was not an ego. The ego was something that we've created, you see, or we've cultured or it's been cultured by our surroundings, engineered. And now we believe it's us, you see. That person who's always angry, that person who's always hateful, greedy, snidey, sinister, that's a creation. That's what we've created. That monster within ourselves, that's not really us. What's us was the person who said to Allah, when Allah said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we said, Shahidna, the pure kind of soul. And we can kind of revive that in the dunya. Allah talks about that. Allah sent us to this dunya. Society then engineered this kind of ego for us, and we just accepted it. And then God sends prophets, you see, to remind us of the pure self. And then when people don't heed, when we don't heed to the message that God put simply in His book, then God sends us other ways to realize. He sends us, and I'm going to mention the verse in a minute. If He loves us and we make sincere dua, God sends us ways that to rekindle the idea, destroy the ego, and come back to that pure soul. That's where we lose, you see. Some of us can only understand it through loss, others through illness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. This verb, those who study Arabic grammar will know, has a nun thaqila at the end of it. And in Arabic, when a nun thaqila, the heavy nun, is used at the end, it means a point is emphatic. It's an emphasis. The idea of God is trying to emphasize here. He said, we will test you bishay'in, with something. Could be just one thing, could be 10. Min al-khawfi, with fear. We will test you with fear. Maybe fear will get you back to that, will awaken you. That's the point here. Maybe fear will awaken us. Or we'll give you hunger. Maybe hunger will awaken us to our realization of what we're supposed to be here for, or what we were sent for. The idea of spiritual evolution. And I'm going to mention that after this point, inshallah, what that means. Then God said, maybe not that. Maybe wa naqsin min al-amwal. Maybe I'll give you poverty. Maybe that will awaken you. Poverty will. Maybe I'll test you with that. Because by testing you, I'm trying to awaken you, you see. Wal anfus. Maybe we'll take life away from you. Wa naqsin min al-amwal wal anfus. Some say here, al-anfus is in reference to the fact that God will give you illness. وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to those who are patient. Meaning at the end of all of that, the only way out of all of those situations is to be patient. Now, interestingly, when somebody passes away or something bad happens, we say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We don't read the full verse, you see. Do you know that this is the beginning of that verse? The beginning of that context. This is the beginning of it. And then God says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمُ الْمُصِيبَةِ, and those people when they are afflicted, meaning with one of these things that God sent us to awaken us, because maybe we were asleep, you see, or maybe we had forgotten, or maybe we made dua and God's answering it now. قَالُوا, they say, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We belong to God, and to God we will return. Like Sheikh Ali wa rahimahullah, on his deathbed, when the doctor came to him and he said to the doctor, don't give me anything. He was dying, but he didn't want to be. At that point, he knew. He said, let me meet my Lord, meaning he was content. He just wanted to meet God. Ulaika, God says, alayhim salawatu min rabbihim wa rahmatun. God says that those people are the ones, salawat here would mean, and those are the people that have God's forgiveness and His mercy. They are those people. God puts the whole idea into context. Now I want to come to this idea of all these things, therefore, are something that God allows us to become awake or awaken ourselves through. What is this idea of spiritual evolution? Then what did I mean by that? Well, if you think about it, on the day of judgment, the people who God enters into the paradise, into the garden, they're all seemingly similar. Read the information we have on it. God talks about in the Quran that the day that no children, family members will benefit you, no material goods, mal, only the person who has a sound heart. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. It seems that all those people that just enter the garden, they just don't get there for no reason. It's that on the earth, they manage to awaken themselves. That's the point. They were woke people. This social justice warrior is talking about woke people now. They were woke people. They're people who are awake in the dunya. And they were awake because they realized their purpose in the dunya. They realized that everything else ends to a means to an end, sorry. Work and these other type of things, these fantasies that we've deluded ourselves with, this idea of a false sense of accomplishment. Yeah, I was promoted, so that's an accomplishment for me. Or that the fact that I've amassed so much academic qualification, that's some kind of achievement for you. But that makes you feel like in the dunya you've become somebody. But yet when you die, they just sit on your shelf and gathering dust, and they've just placed one garment over you, or two garments rather, or three garments, depending on how poor you are. Wrapped you up and put you in the earth, and you took nothing with you. Even remember the Egyptians and the pharaohs, they would put all these things into their grave, and are they going to take it into the hereafter? Well, now we're looting or opening those graves, and people are selling them to museums for millions of pounds, and the dead didn't benefit from them. It's quite clear now. This idea of accomplishment, but that's not the purpose of our life here. The purpose of our life is to awaken ourselves to divine reality, what Sheikh Alawi calls al-haqiqa, a divine reality. And I'm going to mention one of the lines, a wonderful line that in his commentary to Abu Madian al-Ghawth, his poem, his hikam, Sheikh Alawi states, he says, al-mawtu karamatun, well, this Sheikh Abu Madian al-Ghawth, wal-fawtu hasratun wa nadamatun. And he says, Al-mawtu inqita'un anil khalq, wal-fawtu inqita'un anil haqq. He says, Al-mawtu karamatun. He said, death is a karama. Karama is not a miracle here. He means by that, death is a mercy. You can't say karama in the sense that it's almost a gift in that sense. Sheikh Alawi rahmullah ta'ala states, he's not talking, he said, the Sheikh Abu Madian is not talking about when you die. That's not what he's talking about. Why? He says, because later in the same statement, he says, Al-mawtu inqita'an al-khalq. Death is severance from creation, from people, from creation. That's what death is. He said it can't mean real death, because when you die, you just go to more creation. You see, the angels are there, they're created. Barzakh, where you meet people, they're created. He said this is not what Abu Madian is talking about, that death is a karama. He's saying this is talking about the idea of being awake in the dunya. And then he mentions certain statements. He talks about the idea of yamutu al-mar'u ala ma asha alayhi wa yahshuru ala ma mata alayhi. It's a play on several ahadith, although this is not a hadith itself, that a person, yamutu al-mar'u ala ma asha alayhi, a person dies in a state of how they lived, and he will be raised as he died. He will be raised as he died, and he mentions several narrations about it. He says that, rahimullah ta'ala, that real death is ego death. That's real death in this world. To come to a realization, to awaken oneself to the reality that the only truth is God, and God sent me here to do something, and I'm going to fulfill that purpose. And then when I actually die, I'll have already been awake, you see. Sayyidina Ali said, die before you die, essentially. So, and then he says, وَالْفَوْتُ حَسْرَةٌ وَنَدَامَةٌ. And faut means distraction, severance, ignorance. He said that's hasra, that's just a loss, and nadama, guilt. And he says, what is that? What do you mean by severance? He says it means to sever yourself from God. That's what it is. You see, it's just loss and guilt. There's nothing more to it. So back to my original point of being awake here through these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned before I get to death itself, is that the spiritual evolution idea is that we were sent here to become for our angelic dimension, for that to overpower our kind of our bestial dimension or animal dimension, so that when we're close to our death, we are ready to be entered into Jannah. How do we know that? There's a famous hadith, a wonderful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he entered Medina al-Munawwara. This is one of the narrations, there are many narrations, but what did he say to the people? He said, "Oh people," he said, "Afshu salam." He said, "Spread goodness, spread peace. Don't be negative. Spread peace, benefit people. Be selfless." He said, "Wa'atimu ta'am." He said, "Feed people." This is the selflessness element that the Prophet ﷺ is talking about. Meaning, forget yourself here. This is the whole idea of spiritual evolution. It's not about you. It's about destroying the ego, and it's about giving, not taking. He said, "Atimu ta'am," alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, "Feed people." And then he said, so that's to do with khalq, meaning ego death and giving to others. What about your relationship, the loneliness we talked about? He said, وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ النِّيَامِ. He said, wake up at night and build that relationship with your Lord in the silence. Pray in the night. صَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسِ النِّيَامِ. When people are asleep, they're in slumber. He said, تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ بِالسَّلَامِ. You'll enter the garden without a problem. Bisalam. That's the whole idea that we've forgotten what we were sent here for. I told you right at the beginning, we've been sold a lie. Materialism, consumerism, things that they say will make us happy, you see. But it's just a lie. The devil, as he said in the Quran, God says that about the devil says that, God, I'll just sit in this path and I'm just going to take them one by one. Meaning, I'm giving the meaning of that. I want to move on now to the idea of loss and dealing with loss and the importance of loss as well. What is loss, firstly? And loss is something that disappears from our life that we give importance to. That's what we call loss. When people lose money, when we lose money and we're really unhappy about it, and we're really affected by it, we have to ask ourselves a question. That how important was it to us? I mean, that money. We have to ask ourselves a question, rather. That losing wealth, is that what our life is about? Is that the most important thing in our lives? Clearly it is, if we're feeling so much pain due to it. We can understand people, which I'm going to get to. But if we lose dunya and it affects us that much, it just highlights and demonstrates how distant we are from our purpose and our reality. Because let's be honest, I mean, wealth and money is replaceable. We can get more of it, God can grant us more. And it's a means to an end. You know, in these apocalyptic films, zombies and stuff, what do they do with money? They use money and they burn it to heat themselves up because it has no value anymore. The only value is survival, just to stay alive. So about loss of people, that's different. And that's something that, and when I complete it, I'll get to the segment that I've dedicated to what I'll be talking about in some minutes. Loss of life and loved ones, more so, it's very difficult for us. When we lose somebody very close to us, it's something that really pains us. It's a pain that's not, it's not like the pain or that we have with the loss of money or material. It's something completely different. And those who haven't experienced it before, once they experience it, it's unbearable. And the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, alayhi salatu wasalam, the wonderful story where he's, steps into the grave in which he's burying his son, and he's so affected by his weeping, placing his son into the grave and calling for him. And so we see that the messenger of God, when he loses people, and they say to him, "O messenger of God, do you tell us not to weep, yet you weep?" And he said, I didn't tell you not to weep. He said, what you weep, what comes from here is a mercy from God. But what comes from here, I prevent you from. And you saw him there, or the story of when his daughter passes away. Wonderful, such an intimate story that he, alayhi salatu wasalam, his daughter passes away, and he sends her to the women for her ghusl to be done. And in fact, the whole narration is in this book. I may even be able to, if I've marked it, I'll read you the actual riwayah. I don't think I marked it. So I'll just mention it, inshallah, as I remember it. So he says to them, when you give her the ghusl, when you wash her blessed body, that tell me as soon as you finished. So they say, okay. So they finish and they inform him, and he goes into his room and he comes out with a garment in his hand. He said, don't put the kafan on her until you inform me. And he gives it to them, and they put it on her. They wrap her in that material. What was that material? It was his izar. It was his lower garment that he was wearing. Some of the ulama, they mentioned that he wanted his daughter's body to be covered in his warmth, alayhi salatu wasalam, when she was placed in the grave. That was his intimate moment, a final intimate moment with her. That he wanted her to be comforted by him, alayhi salatu wasalam, when she passed away and was to be placed in the grave. So loss is difficult for anybody. The messengers show it, the best of mankind. But that's something very special, though. That feeling that we have for loved ones is not the fact that they've passed away, but it's a fact that there is a momentary separation, and that separation is difficult for us to compute almost in that moment, that they're not with us right now. And we all suffer from that loss when we lose loved ones. However, loss is there for a reason. And one of the greatest benefits of loss and of losing people is to awaken ourselves to God reality, you could say, haqiqah. We should thank Allah that He gave us loss as a reminder of why we're here. Imagine if we didn't have loss. We would never think about God. We would never think about divine reality. God has given it to us to remind us that, look, I never sent you for that. I never sent you to the earth as just to entertain yourself. I sent you for a reason. I sent you to do a job. At the very least, to make yourself good so that you can be in the garden with your loved ones. At least do that much. Even if one is not going to be one that benefits people, constantly throughout their lives. So one of the ways to deal with loss is to interpret loss of loved ones as a strong reminder or a wake-up call of our essential temporal nature here in this earth. Nowhere in the Quran, not one place will you find anywhere in the Quran, open it, where Allah tells you to enjoy it here. And it never tells you to do that. Why have we deluded ourselves to think that we're here? This idea of the pursuit of happiness, the American dream. This place wasn't created to make us happy. We have fleeting moments, don't get me wrong. of happiness. We have moments where we're happy intensely, but do you know what those moments are for? Those moments are reminders or indications of what we're going to receive after. وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. Allah says to the Prophet, God will give to you so later and you will be happy. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. What comes after for you will be better than what you were given here. خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. It's everlasting, it's much better. The point here is that when we delude ourselves to think that we can find happiness here, permanence in meaning a permanent state of happiness, this idea of permanence, and then we can't find it, and then we just fill it with distraction and amusement, because amusement is a dopamine, you see, effect in the brain, so that we think we're happy, and then when we switch off the TV or switch off whatever addiction it is, we feel terrible. We're like junkies who have just come off a trip. We feel terrible because we assume that there's some type of permanent happiness in this dunya, that it doesn't exist here. It's not that. That's not what God sent us here. He allowed us to be happy, and we should be thankful of that. And those moments were so that in the hereafter we can have the full effect of that. Then why did Allah? Sometimes when people pass away, there's a thought that, oh Allah, why did you allow me to love this person? It would have been better that I didn't. At least I wouldn't feel this pain. We all have that moment because of the pain is so severe and so serious and so overwhelming that we're like, God, why did you even allow? And you probably think to yourself, I'm not going to love anybody again because I don't want to feel that pain. That what you would call it, that separation, that inqita'. Well, it's not the pain that you have to remember. It's the love that you should remember. That's what you should remember. The pain is momentary, is temporary, but that love will stay with you. And that love will constantly remind you that you'll be with that person again. There will be that liqa again. That will be that the only thing that matters is getting there to the other side, to be with that person. It's a reminder of that. And that pain was necessary to awaken ourselves to that reality that we're going to be there very soon. The love is necessary. If we didn't build loving connections in this world, who will you be? In whose company will you be in the hereafter? Sayyidina Adam is created by God, and he's given, surroundings that are pleasant, pleasing, through food, endless food, comfort. But he's not happy, you see, because there's something missing, and so God gives him a partner, Hawa, Sayyida Hawa, and then he feels contentment because he feels contentment in other people, and that's very, very important. There's no contentment or happiness in material. The most happiness we can find, and true happiness, is in other people. How do we know that? Because what is it that we're looking forward to most in Jannah? It's to be sitting maybe in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. What else? What greater part of Jannah is there than that? It's in people, isn't it? Why do we feel so upset when they pass away? Because it's that deep love that we don't want to lose. In fact, there's a wonderful hadith, I mentioned it, I don't know if I mentioned it here or it was in Jummah, that there's a person who's in hellfire, and a person of Jannah, maybe a friend of yours, maybe a family member, they say, where's that person, that my friend, my beloved, my companion, and I can't find him anywhere or her anywhere. And then at that moment, that person is removed from the hellfire and put into Jannah just on the mere remembrance of that person. The point again that I'm making, that love in this dunya was placed within us, and we invest that love in other people as to demonstrate what the hereafter will be like. So loving people is essential. Of course it is. It's what makes us human. It's what makes us real people. It's what God sent us on the world to the world to do, is to build wonderful connections so that we can take full benefit for eternity in the hereafter, of those connections. That's the only thing that we find true happiness in. And that's why the worst thing that you can do is to transgress against a person, to take their rights away, to harm them, to bully them, to upset them, to treat them unkindly, unfairly, because it's the opposite of what you were sent for. It's the complete opposite. And that's why God is so harsh on the Day of Judgment for those people who do that to other people. You see, al-Zalimin. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin comments on about the Qanatir. He says when people cross the bridge, they get to a point where they come to the last checkpoint. There's checkpoints on the bridge, 6 according to one narration. The angels stop the person and they say, did you leave the dunya with any problems with another person that were not solved or sorted or so and the person says, yeah, I did, there was so and so and so and so, and the angels say, you can't pass, you're going to stand right here and you're going to stay here until that person comes, until you resolve that difference, because the people of heaven is not for the people of dispute, or the heaven is not for the people of dispute. That even on the Day of Judgment, until you resolve things, you can't go in. So why hold it in the dunya? Why hold it in the dunya? One of the practices of the great companion who, when he walked into the room and the Prophet ﷺ said to the companions that Allah granted that is a man of Jannah. And then later they find out why. It's a long narration, and it's because before he goes to sleep, he forgives everybody that's done anything to him. Just forgives them, because that's the way of the believer. You see, you don't want to take any baggage with you to the hereafter. So again, my point about being awake, or awoken, we can only be awoken, or we can only awaken ourselves often through what God mentioned in this verse, through loss, through hunger, through poverty, through difficulty, through illness. God gave us that as almost a tuhfa, as a gift to us to remind ourselves, because we couldn't get to God in any other way. Unfortunately, not everybody can sit there and reflect and reach God. It's difficult for some people. So God gives them some difficulty, a musibah, and through that they awaken themselves and they thank God then and make shukr that, oh Allah, we thank you that at least we came to our realization, although it came through pain. Like I mentioned what Confucius said that wisdom is gained in 3 ways by a man. Number 1, by imitation, he said, and that's the easiest. You see somebody and you just copy it. Number 2, through reflection, you reflect yourself and you come to wisdom. He said that is the most noble. Or number 3, by experience, and that's the most bitter. And unfortunately, for most of us, is through experience. I want to talk now a little. I'm going to dedicate the next 20 minutes to Saji Manzoor rahimahullah ta'ala. I mentioned already my beloved brother Abdul Basir, who passed away, and many of you won't know him, so it's very difficult for me to talk about him in that sense, because he's a very private person, and probably wouldn't even like me talking about him, to be honest with you. And he was an incredibly humble person, and a person very, very, very dear to me. I will honestly say, for all the years that I knew him, I never ever heard him say anything bad about anybody, which is a great compliment for any human being. And he always phoned me for, normally about, he had questions or stuff like that, or he was incredibly humble. He had a lot of humility, and they say that Babu Tawadu, the door of humility, is the one that the least people in Jannah enter through. So I hope that God grants him that he enters through the door of humility. They say the only person sitting there is Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So I hope that Allah, it was a death that happened suddenly, about almost, for family members. I hope that Allah gives them sabr in this difficult time, and losing somebody so young. He was the exact same age as me. We went to college together and we stayed in touch ever since. So I hope that Allah forgives him and makes his journey easy. Now, to my beloved brother Saji Manzoor. Now, some people have come on here probably just because I'm going to talk about him. I mentioned to his family members that, look, I'm going to dedicate a section to him, and he deserves one, to be honest with you. And I saw that when he passed away, there was a kind of outpouring on social media of people putting up, and even ulama, young ulama and students of knowledge putting up posts about him saying, it's heartbreaking that he's passed away and things like that. For me, and the people of Watford will know, definitely. I had a very special relationship with him, and many of his family members as well, especially his daughter Hafsa, because I was in Watford for the good part of 2 years, between 2011 and the end of 2012, maybe something like that. And I taught there in Watford, and he actually took me to Watford. I'll tell you the story. So at that time, me and Dr. Asim we had produced this syllabus called Path to Salvation, and and we were teaching it here. We've been teaching it here since 2007 or 8, and we had taken it to other cities. But at that time, I'd been teaching it so much, and Dr. Asim will testify to this. I was completely burnt out, and so anyway, my brother at that time, he was head of admin and stuff, and so anybody who had any queries of wanting to have the course taught in their city would contact him. So anyway, Sajib had contacted him, contact my brother. So my brother phoned me and he said to me, as far as my recollection is anyway, that look, there's a guy from Watford who's come down, and can you come? I had at that time moved out from my mom's house and I was living in my own house, which I'm sitting in now. And he said, look, Doc's here as well. Dr. Asim, he's in Birmingham anyway. And so it was late in the evening. So I said, fine, I'll come. And so I went. And I swear by God, and people who go up won't know this, I had absolutely no intention of going to London or Greater London or any other area to teach. Anyway, I got there and I see this guy and he's wearing a suit. I was like, well, okay, either he's dressed up for me or I realized now that he had come from work. I actually never even thought about it after. And so he, with utmost adab, greeted me. I'd never met him before. We sat down, we started talking about general stuff, and then we talked for ages. I mean, and then we got to the topic, and Dr. Asa said to me, look, what do you want to do about this? And I don't know why on earth I said it, but I said, look, I'll go. Doc looked at me and he knew that I was already burnt out from teaching here. I had no intention to go to teach another class, leave alone another city. He looked at me and he said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'll go myself. I'll do it myself. And Doc just laughed. I don't know if he recalls this. And he looked at Sajiba and he said to him, look, of all people, I wouldn't have expected him to have, accepted, the invitation to go and teach there. But anyway, it just happened that way, Qadrullah. And so I agreed to go to Watford every Saturday. And the interesting thing was that I had a class here, and those will remember, Shazad and other people if they're online, that my class in Birmingham was at 5 o'clock. It's 5 till 8:30. I think 5 till, somebody can put exactly the time, 5 till 8. And Watford, so we had to put the Watford class at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I had to leave it at 8:30 as a train to Watford. Those who catch it will know. So I had to get the train. So for the good part of 2 years, I was traveling to Watford every week, every Sunday. And so I would get the train and I would get off and he would pick me up from Watford station at 10:10. And at the beginning, it was at the masjid had a center. We were there. And then after, it was at the library. And so he would take me there, and then we would have some tea at the beginning, and then he would normally just bring it for me, to be honest with you. He would have that ready for me, and I would teach there, and it was a wonderful experience and memories in Watford. And the people who remember it, it's a long time ago now. It's 8-9 years ago, whatever it is. So and at that time I got to know him really well. Of course, I spend every week you spend time with somebody for some years. And one of the things about him was that he was I used to tell him off sometimes because he was really negative, and in the sense that he was always saying to me, we need to fix this and we need to fix that and we've got to do this and we need to fix this. And he used to say to me, he said, Allama Sahab, we need to get this done and we need to get this and all this stuff's going on. He's always talking. I always say to him, look, man, you're too serious. Like, you need to just take a break. Like, why have you like taken all the ummah's this kind of stress on your shoulders? Like, but he was really concerned about it. And I was like de-stressing him. I was saying, look, you're stressing me out here. Like, you need to de-stress a bit. Just do what you can and don't worry about it and he was really disturbed by it, meaning in the sense that his concern was real. He had a real concern, and it was almost detrimental to his person in the sense that people who know him will know, he had like probably, I've only seen him in like 3 variants of clothing. Like, he didn't, he wasn't entertained by the dunya in any way. He had the same car, and he had a good job as well, alhamdulillah. So he didn't even care about it at all. I'll tell you a story. I told Waqas from Watford this yesterday. The week that I was going to leave Watford, I'd finished up my teaching. I taught a Sirah course as well. And it was time to leave, and I'll explain that also in the end of this. So he said to me that, he said, what will it take for me to keep you in Watford? And I said to him, look, my work is done here. I said, I'm going to leave. I'm not coming back here. I said, look, the way that I work is, once my work is done somewhere, my work is done. And now it's your responsibility and the community's responsibility to continue this work. I have to go. My job is somewhere else now. My work is somewhere else. And he said to me that he had another house. He said, look, I'll give you the house to live in for free. You can take it. And, and I'll arrange things for you, everything, if you move to Watford. I've not told anybody this before. And I said to him, no. I said, look, as wonderful as the offer is, but I can't do any more here. I've exhausted myself here. And you need to carry on with the work, whatever it may be, in whatever form it takes. And I'll talk about what form it took. And you need to continue the work. But he was desperate he was desperate for work to continue there. He said, look, we've got more work to do here. And and at that time I'd already agreed with Barking that I would, with Ashfaq, that I would go to move to Barking and continue some work in East London, which oddly enough seems to have come, that journey may have come to an end now as well. But anyway, some points about him that, he ran this organization, Allah. And I will honestly say, I read a message yesterday. I don't know if I can bring it up. I want to read it to you. I want to read this message, and this is from 2017. I don't think I'll be able to find it, but it's something like, he said that we're exhausted. We had run an event, and he said we're exhausted, but we managed to do a lot of work. And that was his state to describe him, exhaustion. I tell you now that he dedicated, I've met very few people in my life like that. He literally dedicated his life to that work. He literally, there was nothing that stood in the way. He would come to Birmingham, travel all the way here for a meeting with me, And one thing he had, which was impeccable, that I've never seen replicated in anybody else really, his level of etiquette, manners, adab for people of knowledge. I've never seen it in anybody else like that. Maybe I've seen other people have respect and honor people of knowledge, but not like him. It was unbelievable level of, it was almost too much. I would actually tell him off sometimes for it. I would say, you know what, don't do this too much. You just end up spoiling people, But he was just something natural in him. That was, and in his brother Khalid as well, and in his sister as well. It was just natural for people of knowledge that they just had that immense kind of respect for them, honored them. And so the work, to come to the work, sorry, he didn't receive any money from it. We live in an age, unfortunately, that the religion is monetized now, in the sense that people only do it for money. I can tell you firsthand, he did not earn 1 penny from that organization, nor the work. In fact, he gave his money to it. you know, he gave his own money that he had in his hard-earned money to it. You know, he would gift money, wallahi, I swear to you, to people of knowledge, like it was like he was giving sweets out. I mean, gift them money. He would never leave them except he gave them something, some money, or you know, we would, after our class every week, and Watford, some people remember this. Khalid would remember it, and others as well. We'd always go to eat, you know, after that same, it's one or two places that he loved, but one place where they had good, really good chane and chicken. But anyway, and we had some really intense, detailed conversations and really good moments, you know. But then next week he'll be ready again with, you know, and I'll tell you something. When I've been, you know, I teach in, well, not anymore, but you know, last 8 years I've been in East London, trying to produce students, and sometimes we didn't drive there. We would because we normally would drive, but me and Shemus will sometimes take the train, and in fact, a whole year we just took the train. I didn't tell him about it. I didn't tell him. And he found out one day that I slipped out that I was talking to him, and I said, look, oh, I was in Watford. And I was like, damn, I shouldn't have said that to him. He said, when were you in Watford? I said, you know, we've been getting the train. And he was so upset. He said, you came to Watford and you didn't phone me. Like I would have taken you to East London. And that's the whole reason I didn't phone him. You know, I don't want to put him out now and pick me up and take me to East London. And some of the students were coming to pick us up, but I was kind of not doing that to not put him out. And I wasn't telling him as well. I wasn't telling him that, look, we're stopping in Watford. It wasn't like I was in Watford for like a long period of time. It was just for those kind of moments that I was there for. And he was incredibly upset when I left Watford in 2003, when I had finished my tenure there, you could call it that. He really wanted me to stay, but he said to me that, he said, what should I do here? And I said to him, look, you know, the future is the children, and you've got something going. Dedicate all of your, and this is not because I told him to do it. He was already going to do it, but it was just a conversation we were having at that time. But I don't want to attribute this anything to myself here, you know. So I said to him, look, the kids, you know, that you've got, you need to everything to the kids. I said, forget the adults. I said, the adults are, that boat has sailed, you know. If you can inculcate in the kids, you know, strong love for God and his messenger, yeah, I said, imagine the ajr you're going to get for it. And he dedicated his time to that, you know, in his organization. Ask people in Watford the amount of dedication he had to it. Unpaid, unpaid, by the way. There's no material gain for it. Allah says in the Quran, and those people who sell their religion for a cheap price, he didn't sell anything. You know, he didn't gain any material wealth from it. He gave his time. You know, I said to students yesterday in the class, I said to them that, do you know that there are two things that you can give to other people, money and time? And I said, you know, time is the most valuable because you can't get that back, you see. Money, you can earn it again, but time you can't. And those people who give their time are the best of people. You know, purpose, I talked about it in a whole discourse. That man had purpose. Whether he knew it or not, you know, you know, he just, whether he knew it or not, he was fulfilling what God had sent all of us on the earth to do. And something incredible is the following. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a student of knowledge. He wasn't even that knowledgeable in that sense. You know, he wasn't a person who sit there and say this hadith and this narrator, Rawi and Darimi and Daraqutni, and this person says, and I said this, and you know, any of these names. But he had love for God, you know, he had love for, you know, this religion that the messenger of God gave to us, والسلام, and he deeply, deeply, deeply loved the Prophet ﷺ, deeply, you know, and that really was a driving force in him, I think. He was definitely the driving force. He didn't know that much. All these people who give preference to like, oh, the knowledge in that sense, he didn't have much knowledge. He did more work than many of the ulama here, or the people of knowledge here did much more work than them, you know, in that city. And one thing that he was desperate for was unity. He always would say to me, he said, I was sitting with it, people know this and Watford about him, that he would say to me that, why can't you younger scholars just unite? Like, why can't you? And people who know me, just, you know, I don't want to, like, I'm not a controversial person. People try to make me controversial, like force me to be controversial. I try to stay away. And I said to him, like, you're talking to the wrong guy here. He said, but I've talked to all of them. Why can't you just? And I said, look, the nature of human beings often is not to unite. What you need to focus on is just your job. If they can't unite, then just you bring them in one by one. That's what I said to him. I said, you just call them separately and let them benefit the community. Just that. And that's what he did. He tried his best to do that, to bring in different people, constantly bring them in. He's been actually asking me, it never came to fruition. Since I left Watford, you may not know, he's been asking me to come back at least for events, but I've been too busy, and it's one regret that I have, and I'd have to live with that regret that whilst he was alive, I didn't manage to come back to Watford, even for a one day or even for a moment, that I could, an event or something. I promised Waqas yesterday on the phone, I said, I'll come back now, maybe gathering to remember him or something. Once lockdown eases, inshallah, if Watford people can probably arrange it, you've got my agreement on that and my promise for that. But, when he passed away, before he even passed away, I mean, he lost his parents, the whole family, they lost their parents and their grandparents 2 weeks ago. His mother and father died. They made their journey to the everlasting realm 2 weeks ago. I think they passed away within hours of each other. To lose one parent is difficult. To lose both is even more difficult. To lose them both on the same day is immensely difficult. So that family, have gone through a lot. All the brothers, the sisters, and the grandchildren, and the nieces, and the nephews, and it's a very big family. So I was in the loop, of course, with me, anybody who knows me, I switched my phone off in February last year. My phone's not on. You can only get me through WhatsApp. He probably didn't know that. When he became ill, I knew about it, but it was weird, to me, I thought, why hasn't he contacted me? Is he upset with me? I don't have a message from him, Hafsa contacted me. I was in contact with Hafsa and talking to Hafsa about it. And other people his sister, Sajida also, for prayers, but he hadn't contacted me. And I was I thought, I felt really bad. I'd then switch my phone on. I'd randomly switch it on here and there. And then I had message after message from him. I didn't realize that he had been messaging me, saying my parents are ill, please make dua for them. But I didn't know that he had contacted me at that time. And then I was just before he became seriously unwell, I was in contact with him. Now, God took him very quickly, and it's very difficult for the family. So we lost him this week. I was informed the day that he passed away that he doesn't have long, and I thought maybe he'll pull through. Maybe God will give him more life. But this is something very important. Death doesn't care who you are, what you do. You could be a person who is doing the greatest religious work. God is going to take you. I want to read something to you. I put it aside to read today. I don't know where I put the book, but it's a statement that I read that really got me. Let me get it for you. Yeah, so this is Ibn al-Wardi. In his poem, talks about death and people, because sometimes we think, I'm a good person, I'm a great person, I'm doing work for God's religion, why would God take me? Of course God's going to give me old age because he's going to let me help people in the religion. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Death doesn't differentiate. God took scholars at a young age. Ghazali died according to some before 50. Nawawi according to some before 40. Are we better than Nawawi or Ghazali? The Shaykh says, and this is Ibn Wardi, Sharaf the Lamiyah. No, this is the Sharaf the Lamiyah of Ibn Wardi, Makinawi. Ibn Wardi states, and he says, Aina arbabul hijah, ahlul nuha, aina ahlul ilmi wal qawm al uwal. He says, where are arbabul hijah? wa ahlul nuha. He said, where have all the intelligent, great, scholarly people gone? Where are they? He says, Aina ahlul ilmi, where are the people of knowledge? Wal qawmul uwali, and the early people. Meaning he's saying they've all passed away, they're not here anymore. Their knowledge didn't save them from death. Their greatness didn't save them. They've become a name now in the books of history. And that will be the case with all of us. His death is untimely for us in the sense that we didn't expect it, at the age of 52 or 53, And that's not old, by the way. But it's a reminder to us that here's a man, rahimahullah, that spent his latter life, and I can testify to that, in trying to help his community, help people come closer to God and his messenger. That was his single most important concern, and he sacrificed his own family for that. Remember that. That stress was transferred and carried over, as it does to all people of knowledge as well. Remember that people of knowledge or people who in this field, their family often have to make sacrifices for them, for that work to, and so his greatness in that will be remembered, I hope, daily by the people. And I said to the students in London, and I've got many students in London, I've been in London for years, and people have read with me for many years. I said, every one of you and every person that, if anything, that they benefit from my classes in London, are all indebted to that one single man. Because if it were not for him, I wouldn't have gone to Greater London to begin with. I wouldn't have been in Watford for Ashfaq to come and take me to East London. I just wouldn't have been there. And they're indebted to him. And this shows us that some good that we may see as small that we do, and he didn't see what he was doing as a big thing, by the way. I've never heard him praise himself ever, or praise his work, or talk about himself. In fact, I can't remember a single time where he talked about himself, except one. And I'll tell you a funny story he told me. He said, he told me once, he said, do you know that I purchased a samosa for £35? So what on earth is this guy talking about? He said, yeah, I purchased a samosa for £35 once. I said, go on, tell me the story. He said, there was a place that makes good samosas and I really wanted one. He said, I went in, I parked my car, went to get a samosa. I got it and came out and I had a parking ticket. And he said, I took the samosa and I threw it on the floor. He didn't even get the samosa out of it. And that was his joke, that it was £35 samosa. But that's probably the only story he told me about himself. Other than that, he never ever spoke about himself. And that's something to learn from, of the great work that he did, in Watford, and the amount of children that he helped, and the amount of knowledge he facilitated in people's lives and changing in their religion. And somebody, Waqas, was telling me that if it weren't for him, he wouldn't have come to any of the classes or anything of that kind. And I do want to remember him, as much as it hurt me that he's, as difficult as it was for me, because I had a very deep relationship with him, closeness to him, that we have to take benefit from that, from his work. And we have to remember him as the person in Watford that did, they should have a statue in Watford for him, that did an immense amount of work for the religion. And, if you, at the very least, of all those people that are in Watford, at the very least, you should pray for him. You should pray for him. Read some Quran for him, give some sadaqah for him, because you owe that to him. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that when somebody passes away, speak of their good. I don't have any bad to speak of him. And that's why I want to dedicate this segment to him, and to the work that he did in Watford. And I wanted to put my own personal relationship to one side, because that's really deep with him, that I had with him. But I wanted something to talk about his legacy almost. And the question that I ask is, who will carry that work on now in Watford? You're going to have to ask yourselves. Somebody has to step up, or it'll probably take 10 people to do his job, to fulfill that role. And to his family members, my deepest condolences. We've all lost somebody incredibly dear. And, on like I said, that on the day that I found out that he passed away, only an hour later, so I got a phone call that Abdul Basir passed away. I lost 2 people in space of 1 hour. So it was, and I think they passed away very closely actually in the nighttime. So first my deepest condolences, but I want to remember him as all the great things for all the great things that he did, and he will always have this deep place in my heart, definitely. And we hope that on the day of judgment, I hope that now he's seen reality as it is, and that yearning that he had, and he had an immense deep yearning for the Prophet ﷺ, that he now has received that. We all are here upset that he's left, but he's hopefully pleased that he has entered the company of the Messenger of God. We're the ones that lost khasara. He's the one of fadl and of rahmah of Allah, that he's entered into that mercy of God, and that we hope he's in that company in the barzakh. He's been buried now, so he's in the barzakh and will be there soon. And that was my whole idea of today, of being awake. He was probably awake and he didn't know it. He never gave it attention, but he was certainly awake in that. And we ask Allah that He forgives all his shortcomings. Everybody has shortcomings, and forgive that and give the family sabr. And that's my kind of segment dedicated to not dedicated to the director of Allah Institute, but dedicated to a beloved friend, and companion, and a friend that I'll never forget. And I hope that God unites us, on the day of judgment and in the hereafter. So the dedication is to a brother and a friend and a companion in this world, and inshallah in the hereafter. And for everybody else that he's benefited, please pray for him and pray for his family, inshallah. I'll open it up for questions now. Hamza, if you want to get any and take any, inshallah, I'll answer them. Inshallah. Khair, inshallah. We'll stop it there. We leave it at that. Allah bless all of you, inshallah. And we'll continue. For those who are new to the discourses, these are discourses that I kind of have every week, every Wednesday, 8 o'clock. So please log on and join in. And they're on different topics. We've already done 12 or 13, maybe 14. They're all available on Deen Central's YouTube channel. So please pass the message on, get people to come on and listen and try to kind of join in. And we're trying to make this a great community effort. And we have it every single week without any. I try to have it every week. Only holidays here and there, but inshallah. I'll just answer this final question: is a person a martyr if he dies of COVID? Yeah, there is a hadith of waba, that a person who dies of a contagion, that he dies the death of a martyr. So inshallah we'll leave it at that. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم وأتوب إليه. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.